In this video I will talk about my experience of breeding Hypancistrus L333 King Tiger Plecos, and are seeing my breeding setup in here. That's a raising setup, and that's L236, but more specifically I will share a few tips on how to successfully breed Hypancistrus L333 King Tiger Pleco. Last month I pulled out more than 40 juveniles of different sizes from different spawns from this tank, and now I've rehomed. Basically I managed to sell most of them. I left about 5 of gold line strain and a few of white line strain. Well, basically white line strain breeding group is in this tank, and yeah, so I would say that I have been relatively successful over the last 1 year in breeding Hypancistrus L333 King Tiger Plecos. I have 2 strains. This is a tank where I keep my gold strain, and this breeding group is a larger one, so there are 3 males and 2 females in here, and down here I have white line, and in here I have 2 males and 1 female, and a number of juveniles. You can see here actually one of the juveniles hiding in here. That's a male, that's another male, and females do not normally stay in caves, they hide elsewhere. It's only males that occupy Pleco caves. And yeah, so basically breeding Hypancistrus L333 is not too complicated as long as you create appropriate conditions for your breeding group. And obviously you need compatible males and females. In order to achieve that, well, my recipe was always to collect a group of this fish, so you would probably need at least 5 or 6 of them. Of both sexes, so you need a few females and you need a few males in order to have this breeding colony, because very often if you only have a pair, a male and female, and actually I started my colony about 2 years ago with just a pair of gold line wild caught Hypancistrus L333, and they've never bred for me. I've had them for more than a year, and conditions were right, but I just had no spawns at all until I started to expand my breeding colony, and until I've added more males and females, and that's when I started to get some breeding activity out of them. But nevertheless, in my experience, you need to create a certain set of conditions in order to encourage your Plecos to breed, and I will talk about these few tips that I can share with you from my own experience. Well, first of all, I'll say a couple of words about my setup where I keep my breeding colonies. You can see this is a bare bottom tank. I used to have sand in here a while ago, and they actually used to breed quite fine with a sand bottom. I don't know whether they liked it or not, but it was always challenging for me to clean the bottom, to siphon the bottom when there was sand in here. And as the numbers were increasing, as there were more and more juveniles in this tank, it was harder for me to maintain it clean, and I eventually removed all the sand from this tank, and basically now it's just a collection of Pleco caves, slate rock, different other caves that I've had, and quite a lot of alpha grog. I keep alpha grog in all my Pleco tanks. This is a raising tank, and this is a breeding setup. I keep it in both raising and breeding setups because, well, I don't have here any efficient biological filtration. I certainly have a sponge filter in the back, and it mostly provides mechanical filtration, but obviously the sponge also creates surface for aerobic bacteria to populate it. But nevertheless, there is no dedicated biological filtration in this setup. And alpha grog, just like lava rock in here, for example, I have some lava rock, and there is lava rock in here as well, provides some extra surface for aerobic bacteria to colonize, and this is great actually. So apart from all of these things, I have a flow pump. I'll try to zoom in. It's just a regular, no brand, Chinese made flow pump, which blows water in two directions. I have a venturi on one of the ends of this flow pump, and it produces lots of bubbles, providing extra oxygen. I have a relatively large sponge filter in the back, a thermometer and a heater. That's it. Well, I also have light here, but it's a very weak LED lamp. There's no plants here, and these fish, they don't really need light because they are nocturnal and they are accustomed to living in dark. Tip number one: what do you need to encourage your Hypancistrus L333 king tiger plecos to breed, and probably quite a lot of other Hypancistrus, is high temperature. And I would say high temperature is absolutely essential. By high temperature, I mean anything between 30 degrees Celsius and possibly 32 degrees Celsius. You can see now I have 31 degrees Celsius in this tank, and this would be my normal breeding temperatures. The higher you keep your temperature, the higher is the likelihood that your fish will breed, because in the wild these fish live in very high temperatures, going all the way to 35, 36 degrees Celsius. I would not normally get my temperatures that high unless I'm treating the fish and unless I'm medicating the fish. So normally I will keep it at about 31 or 32 degrees Celsius, and this is what keeps them very active, and this is what gets them spawning every second week basically. So high temperature is a tip number one. Well, tip number two is protein-rich diet. These fish eat a lot and they need food on a daily basis. So if you expect to feed your plecos maybe like once or twice a week, they're most likely not going to breed for you. As a staple, I'm feeding them pellets, so I'm feeding them most of the time this Hikari pellets. This is not a sponsored video, I'm just showing you what I feed my fish. And the reason why I feed these pellets as a staple is because these are relatively large pellets, and Hypancistrus are large fish. My breeding males are approximately like 12 to 15 centimeters each. So it's one of the largest species of Hypancistrus, and they enjoy larger pieces or larger pellets. These are also sinking pellets, and they don't decompose in water fast, which provides enough time for this fish to actually feed on them. Well, previously I've tried different other Hikari carnivore pellets, which also would work fine. Occasionally I will, well, not occasionally, approximately like 3 times per week I will throw some algae wafers. And I now only have these mini algae wafers, but they would also eat sort of a proper and larger algae wafers. And I'm feeding them also some of the Dr. Basler foods, but this is more for juveniles, because these are smaller grade pellets, and juveniles absolutely enjoy them, but adults, I have not noticed my Hypancistrus adults actually eat Dr. Basler food, but maybe they do. And approximately 2 times per week I would feed them with frozen prawns, which provide a lot of protein, and they absolutely enjoy them. I'm trying not to feed them mussels, because mussels have something that's called Siamese, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and that's not very good for Hypancistrus on a regular basis. And yeah, basically high protein diet is very important. And this is also why it is important to keep your breeding colony in a species only dedicated setup, where there's no other fish that will compete with them for food. Because Hypancistrus, they're not bristlenose plecos, they're not plecostomus, larger plecostomus species, which will basically fight for their food. That's not the case with Hypancistrus. They are not very good at competing for food. They eat only once it's completely dark. They're nocturnal, so even if I'll throw some pellets right now, they're not going to come out and they're not going to touch them until it gets completely dark. So they will not compete well for food, for example, in a community tank or in a tank with other fish. Previously I used to keep them with Corydoras, and they never bred for me, because I guess Corydoras have picked up most of their food, and they were not necessarily hungry, but they were not conditioned well enough when there were other fish in here. But now I'm quite confident that they get all the food that I'm giving them, and they get enough protein that keeps them in breeding condition. And tip number 3, flow or current. Well, I know it's highly debatable among Pleco keepers whether you actually need strong flow in your Pleco tanks. In the wild, most of these fish, especially Hypancistrus, they live in rivers with an exceptionally strong current, with a strong flow of water. This is what they're used to. Yes, possibly you can get them to breed in a tank without flow. In my experience, I've kept both Hypancistrus and other types of L-number Plecos in tanks with flow and without flow. And in my experience in tanks without flow, I've never had this fish breeding actually. I don't know whether it's a coincidence or it's actually something that actually is important, but in my case I've always had this fish breeding when I provide really high flow. And they tend to enjoy the flow because when the flow is directed sideways, when it's not blowing straight into their caves, this is what they're not going to like. But if the flow is behind and it's kind of a blowing the stream, the current forward or sideways, this is what they're going to like. Well, so I have these 3 tips for you, and I hope they will be useful in your own efforts to spawn and to breed Hypancistrus L333 King Tiger Plecos. And that's it for now. Don't forget to leave your comments in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and soon I will make a separate video about my other breeding projects, mostly Pleco breeding projects in my fish room. And I'll see you soon.